Yeah, you heard that right. The HOA president herself tried to kick me out of my own cabin without realizing the land she was standing on actually belonged to me. She thought I was just some outsider moving into her perfect valley community, barking rules, sending fines, even threatening to shut down my cabin. But when the truth came out that I was the one who owned the valley, the roads, and the land beneath every one of their homes, well, let's just say Karen completely lost it. This story's got it all. Power trips, petty HOA drama, courtroom twists, and one huge dose of karma that'll make you want to grab popcorn and watch it burn. So before we dive in, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe for more wild HOA revenge stories, and turn on those notifications, because this one's about to get real good. You ever have one of those moments where you just know the second you pull up somewhere, trouble's waiting for you? Yeah, that was me the day I moved into my new valley cabin. The second I turned off the dirt road and rolled through those oak trees, I could feel the tension in the air, like I was stepping into somebody else's little kingdom. The kind of kingdom that had rules, power-hungry neighbors, and one self-appointed queen. You know the type. Karen. Now here's the thing. That cabin, that land, it had been in my family for decades. My granddad built it back in the 70s before any of these HOAs even existed. But over the years, developers built up the surrounding area. Then came the Valley Estates HOA, a group of people who thought owning matching mailboxes and holding potluck dinners gave them the right to control everything around them. And when they saw my old cabin still sitting proudly on its own private plot, outside their authority, oh boy, did that make their blood boil. But what none of them knew, what Karen didn't know, was that I wasn't just some random guy moving into a dusty old cabin. No. The entire valley, including their perfect little neighborhood, technically sat on land that I owned. And it was time to remind them who they were really dealing with. I remember that first morning like it was yesterday. The air was crisp, sun just peeking over the ridgeline. I parked my truck out front, started unloading a few boxes, and that's when I saw her, standing right at the edge of my driveway like she was inspecting a crime scene. Short blonde hair, big sunglasses, clipboard in hand. She had that HOA enforcer look, the kind of person who corrects your trash bin placement with a ruler. She didn't even introduce herself before barking out, "Excuse me, you can't just move in here without approval. This area is under HOA management." I looked at her, smiled, and said, "Ma'am, I think you've got the wrong guy. This cabin's been here long before your HOA was even a thought." Her lips tightened. "Well, that may be, but if you're planning to live here, you'll still need to abide by the community rules. There are regulations about exterior paint, landscaping, and—" I cut her off. "Regulations don't apply on my property. This land is private, always has been." She gave a little snort and scribbled something on her clipboard. "We'll see about that." Then she turned around, heels clicking like she owned the place. I just laughed to myself. Oh, this was going to be fun. Over the next few days, I got settled in, fixed up the porch, cleaned out the well pump, replaced the window screens. Nothing fancy, just good old-fashioned elbow grease. But every single day, I'd catch her snooping. First, it was her walking her dog past my driveway 5 times in one morning. Then she started sending friendly HOA letters, stuff like, "Your cabin's exterior does not match the HOA-approved aesthetic. Please remove unapproved vehicles from your driveway. Yard maintenance must meet community guidelines." Each one signed with her name, Karen Whitmore, HOA President. I swear she probably thought that signature carried more weight than the U.S. Constitution. So, one afternoon, I decided to have a little fun. I printed out a big sign and stuck it right by my gate. It read, "Private property not under HOA jurisdiction. Trespassers will be reported." I could see her from across the road, fuming. She actually stopped her little golf cart in the middle of the road and just stared at it like it personally insulted her. Then came the inspection. Yeah, apparently she and her board of mini Karens
decided to do a community audit. I was in the yard working on the generator when I saw 3 of them walking up, clipboards in hand. Karen was leading the charge, of course. "Sir," she said in that fake sweet voice, "we're conducting a community inspection, and we've noticed several violations here, including unapproved fencing, unauthorized exterior modifications, and potential code issues." I raised an eyebrow. "On my private land?" "Yes," she said. "All homes within the Valley Estates perimeter are subject to HOA oversight. You'll need to attend the next board meeting to discuss compliance." Now, I could have yelled. I could have told her to get lost, but instead I smiled because I had something better in mind. "Sure," I said. "I'll be there." A week later, I showed up at the HOA clubhouse. You could practically smell the self-importance in the air. The board members sat in a neat little row behind folding tables, each one with a name tag and a stack of papers. Karen was leading the charge, of course. "Sir," she said in that fake sweet voice, "we're conducting a community inspection, and we've noticed several violations here, including unapproved fencing, unauthorized exterior modifications, and potential code issues." I raised an eyebrow. "On my private land?" "Yes," she said. "All homes within the Valley Estates perimeter are subject to HOA oversight. You'll need to attend the next board meeting to discuss compliance." Now, I could have yelled. I could have told her to get lost. But instead, I smiled because I had something better in mind. "Sure," I said. "I'll be there." A week later, I showed up at the HOA clubhouse. You could practically smell the self-importance in the air. The board members sat in a neat little row behind folding tables, each one with a name tag and a stack of papers. Karen sat dead center, like a judge, waiting to deliver a sentence. She smiled when she saw me. "Mr. Lawson, we appreciate you coming. We've reviewed your case, and we've decided that unless you bring your property into compliance, we'll be forced to pursue fines." I leaned forward. "That's interesting, because before you issue any fines, you might want to look at this." I slid a folder across the table. Inside were the original property deeds, signed, sealed, and recorded in the county clerk's office. My grandfather's name, then my father's, then mine. She flipped through them, her smile faltering. "What exactly am I looking at?" "You're looking," I said slowly, "at the title for the entire valley, including the land your neighborhood sits on. The HOA pays rent on it through a holding company, and guess who that company belongs to?" Her face went pale. "You?" I nodded. "Yeah. So, technically, Karen, I'm your landlord." The whole room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. She didn't take it well. The next week, she was in full meltdown mode, sending letters to the county, demanding investigations, calling me a fraud. She even tried to get the HOA to vote me out, which was hilarious because I wasn't even in it. But here's where things got good. I started looking into their finances. Turns out, this HOA had been skimming money from resident dues for beautification projects that didn't exist, landscaping that was never done, road maintenance that was never scheduled. I didn't have to dig deep. It was all public record. So I did what any self-respecting landlord would do. I notified them of a rent adjustment. See, the HOA had been paying dirt-cheap land lease rates for over 20 years. I raised it, legally, by 30%. You should have seen Karen's face when that notice hit her inbox. She stormed down my driveway the next morning, waving the letter. "You can't do this! You're extorting the community!" I crossed my arms. "Actually, I'm adjusting rates in line with inflation and property value. You know, basic economics." "You're ruining everything!" she yelled. "No, Karen," I said with a grin. I'm just reminding you who owns everything. And that's where it really began, the war between Karen's HOA and me. She wasn't done, not even close. Over the next few weeks, she started pulling stunts, blocking the shared road, calling inspectors, even filing bogus noise complaints. It was harassment, plain and simple. But she didn't know I'd already been a step ahead. Because when you own the land, you own the leverage. And I was about to use it.
You know, when people say don't poke the bear, they should really add a footnote that says, especially when the bear owns the forest. Because the moment Karen realized I wasn't bluffing about owning the land, she went from nosy neighbor to full-blown villain in record time. I'm talking neighborhood-wide email blasts, emergency HOA meetings, and even flyers slipped under my door like she was running some kind of suburban propaganda campaign. Her message? Simple. We must take back our community from this outsider. Yeah, outsider. The same guy whose family literally built the valley. The first major attack came a week later. I woke up one morning, went out to get my mail, and there it was, a giant notice of violation nailed right to my gate. In bold letters, it read, "This property is in violation of multiple HOA standards including unkempt appearance, unregistered structures, and unauthorized use of heavy equipment. Immediate compliance required." And at the bottom, Karen's signature, big, fancy, and written like she thought it meant something in court. I actually laughed out loud. Then I took a photo of it, printed out my own piece of paper, and nailed it right next to hers. Mine said, "Notice of ownership. This property and the surrounding land are private and not subject to HOA authority. Please remove your signs before they are considered litter." Then I signed it, "Your Landlord." 2 hours later, she was standing at my gate again. Her face was red, her sunglasses barely hiding the fury in her eyes. "You think this is funny, don't you?" she snapped. "Karen," I said calmly, "I don't think it's funny. I think it's tragic that you don't understand basic property law." She shoved a folder at me. "We've contacted the county. You're interfering with community maintenance access roads." I flipped through her papers, all HOA memos and self-made documents, no official county seals. "Karen," I said, handing them back, "this isn't the county. This is just you writing angry letters to yourself." She huffed, stumped back to her golf cart, and sped off like a toddler who just got told no dessert. But I knew she wasn't giving up. 2 days later, I caught a city truck parked at the entrance to the private road that led into my property, the same road that connected to the HOA's neighborhood. I walked up to him and asked the guy inside, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Ma'am named Karen from Valley Estates filed a complaint that this road is unsafe and needs to be closed for maintenance. Said she had authorization from the property owner." I grinned. "Oh, she did, huh?" Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded copy of the deed. "Well, buddy, I am the property owner, and I didn't authorize anything." He looked surprised, nodded, and drove off. Karen had officially tried to shut down the road to cut me off, but all she managed to do was expose that she didn't even have jurisdiction over the land. So I took it one step further.
You ever watch a storm roll in so slow you can feel the air getting heavier by the minute? That's what it felt like the morning of the court hearing. Karen had spent weeks telling everyone she was finally going to bring justice to the valley. She even sent an HOA-wide email with the subject line, "The truth will come out." Sure, Karen, let's get that truth out in the open. The court day. The county courthouse sat right in the middle of town, red brick and old oak benches that smelled like varnish and dust. I showed up in jeans and a clean button-up. Nothing fancy, just me. Karen, on the other hand, marched in like she was filming a reality show, bright blazer, folders stacked to her chin, and that little smirk she wore when she thought she'd already won. When the clerk called our case, Whitmore versus Lawson, the whole courtroom seemed to lean forward.
Even a few HOA residents showed up, whispering in the back pews like they'd come for a matinee performance. Karen's lawyer stood, cleared his throat, and started with the kind of opening that sounds good until you realize it's all smoke. Your Honor, my client, president of the Valley Estates Homeowners Association, is seeking declaratory relief against an individual unlawfully occupying and claiming ownership of land within the HOA jurisdiction. He went on about squatters, forged deeds, and community safety. I could see Karen nodding, arms crossed, like every word was gospel. Then my attorney stood. A calm guy named Doug. He didn't raise his voice once. Your Honor, the defendant, Mr. Lawson, is not a squatter. He is the legal owner of record for all parcels comprising what is now known as Valley Estates. I have certified copies of the original deeds, tax receipts, and lease agreements signed by the HOA itself. He dropped a binder on the table with a thud that echoed through the room. Karen's smile froze. The documents. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, flipped through the pages, eyebrows lifting higher the further she read. After a minute, she looked up. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "it appears the HOA's existence is contingent on a land lease signed by the Lawson Family Trust. Were you aware of this arrangement?" Karen hesitated. No, Your Honor, that must be some kind of mistake. We own our homes free and clear." The judge tilted her head. Free and clear of the structures, perhaps, but the land itself? These documents show otherwise. The gallery started whispering. I just sat there, hands folded, letting the truth do the heavy lifting. Doug continued, "Your Honor, furthermore, my client, Mr. Lawson, has been subjected to ongoing harassment, trespass, and defamation by the HOA under Mrs. Whitmore's leadership." He held up photos. Karen at my fence line, Karen ripping down my signs, Karen blocking the easement with orange cones. Karen's face went crimson. "Those were safety inspections," she blurted. The judge's gavel tapped once. "Mrs. Whitmore, you may remain silent until addressed." The rest of the hearing was downhill for her. Every claim she'd made collapsed under paperwork older than she was. After an hour, the judge leaned back and said, "Based on the evidence, the court recognizes Mr. Lawson as the lawful owner of the property in question. The plaintiff's petition is dismissed with prejudice." Then, turning directly to her, "Mrs. Whitmore, I suggest you review your HOA's governing documents carefully before filing future suits. You may also wish to consider an apology." Bang. Gavel down, case over. The fallout. The ride home felt like driving with the windows down after a long winter. Freedom. By the time I got back to the valley, the news had already spread. My phone was buzzing nonstop, messages from residents, some apologizing, some begging me to take over management, some just relieved Karen had finally been shut down. That evening, I poured myself a coffee and sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. For the first time in months, the valley was quiet. But the peace didn't last long. Because Karen didn't quit. She never quit. Karen's breakdown. 3 days later, she showed up again, storming down my driveway like she owned the asphalt. "You think this is over? You embarrassed me in front of the entire community!" I leaned on the porch rail. "Karen, you did that all by yourself." She jabbed a finger in my direction. "You might have won your little court stunt, but you can't just raise rents. You can't just change our contracts." I cut her off. "You mean the leases that expire next month?" "Yeah, I can." Her mouth opened, then closed again,
like she'd forgotten how words worked. "Karen," I said calmly, "why don't you take a breather? Maybe focus on your garden club or whatever it is you actually enjoy, because the HOA game, it's done." She turned and stomped off without another word. The cleanup. The next week, I met with the remaining board members, Rick, Denise, and a few others who were clearly done with Karen's drama. We sat around a long folding table in the clubhouse, papers spread everywhere. Rick rubbed his temples. "Man, we're broke. She spent half the budget on lawyer fees and signs nobody asked for." I nodded. "We'll fix it. First, dissolve the HOA. Second, I'll form a new management group to handle essentials: roads, lighting, trash pickup, transparent costs, no nonsense." Denise looked up. "And Karen?" I smiled. "Karen's welcome to stay as a regular resident. No titles, no power." They all agreed faster than I expected. You could practically feel the relief in the room. That night, I drafted the official notice. Effective immediately, Valley Estates HOA is hereby dissolved. All community operations will transfer to Valley Land Management, LLC. Residents will receive new lease terms within 30 days. No more fake fines, no more clipboard patrols. Just peace. Karen's last move. Of course, Karen didn't take it lying down. 2 nights later, motion alerts pinged my phone. I pulled up the camera feed, and there she was again, sneaking around the entrance with a crowbar. I called the sheriff's office. They knew the story by now. Half the deputies lived in nearby neighborhoods and had heard the whole saga. When the cruiser pulled up, the headlights hit her mid-swing, trying to pry the Valley Land Management sign out of the ground. She froze like a deer in a spotlight. "Evening, Mrs. Whitmore," the deputy said. "You want to explain what you're doing on private property at midnight?" She stammered something about community upkeep, but the deputy wasn't buying it. They escorted her home, no cuffs, just a warning, but word spread fast. By morning, everyone knew, and that was the final crack in her crown. The new Valley. A month later, the transition was complete. The new management system ran smoother than anyone expected. Bills were lower, repairs actually happened, and for the first time in years, people waved at each other without fear of getting fined for the wrong mailbox color. Rick dropped by one afternoon with a grin. "Never thought I'd say this," he laughed, "but you make a pretty good landlord." I shrugged. "I'm not trying to be a landlord, just trying to keep the place honest." He nodded. "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. Karen put her house up for sale last week." I tried not to smile too wide, but I won't lie, it felt good. The surprise ending. A few weeks later, a letter showed up in my mailbox, handwritten, from Karen. I almost tossed it, but curiosity won. It read, "I was wrong. You were right. I let power get the best of me. The Valley looks better now than it ever did under my watch. Don't think I'll ever say this out loud, but thank you." No signature, just that. I folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it away in the desk drawer. Because even though Karen had been the biggest thorn in my side, a part of me respected that she finally admitted it, even if it took losing everything to do it. That evening, as the sun went down, I walked the ridge above the valley. The houses below glowed gold in the last light. Kids rode bikes on the street where Karen once patrolled with her clipboard. I stopped by the old welcome sign, Valley Estates, letters fading. I added a smaller sign underneath, freshly painted. "Welcome to Lawson Valley, where respect is the only rule." I smiled, hands in my pockets. I woke up that morning to the sound of silence. The kind of silence you only get after a storm. The kind where nature takes a deep breath after watching humans make fools of themselves. The HOA office? Empty. The shiny white sign that used to scream Valley Ridge Homeowners Association was now lying in the dirt, the letters half cracked, like the pride of the people who once ruled this place. And there I was, coffee in hand, standing on my porch, watching a line of moving trucks snake their way down the valley road. Karen's Mercedes was the last one in line, slow, sputtering, dragging a trailer stacked with boxes labeled HOA records and Karen's property. Yeah, even her boxes were labeled like a warning sign. I leaned against the post, took a sip of my coffee, and couldn't help but smile. You know, when I first bought this valley property, I just wanted peace, a quiet cabin life, maybe some fishing, maybe some grilling by the stream. I didn't come here for drama. But Karen, she came looking for control, and she lost everything because of it. Now it was my turn to close the story. When I walked down to the HOA office one last time, a couple of residents were out front. They weren't shouting anymore. They weren't wearing their bright blue HOA volunteer shirts or waving around clipboards. They just looked tired. One of them, an older man named Henry, who used to mow lawns around the neighborhood, waved at me awkwardly. "Hey, Mr. Walker, we heard the county auctioned off the HOA properties. You bought it all?" I nodded. "Yep, the office, the storage lot, even the little Welcome to Valley Ridge sign by the gate. It's all part of my land now." He blinked. "So, you're basically the landlord." "Basically," I grinned. "No, Henry, I am the landlord." A few of them started laughing nervously. They didn't know if I was joking, but I wasn't. Karen had made one critical mistake. She'd kept the HOA's finances tied to her personal account, and once the legal notices hit, it all came crashing down like dominoes. I didn't need revenge anymore. The law handled that part for me. But I wasn't done teaching a lesson. 2 weeks later, after the smoke had settled, I sent out a letter to every homeowner in the valley. It started simple. As of this month, Valley Ridge will operate as a privately owned community. No more HOA, no more fees for fake rules. You will, however, pay fair rent for the use of land, utilities, maintenance, and access roads, all of which belong to me. Pay it monthly or move out. Simple as that. The reaction? Pure chaos. Some folks were relieved. They'd hated the HOA for years and saw me as a hero. Others, mostly Karen's loyalists, were furious. They claimed it wasn't fair. They wanted to negotiate. But this time, I wasn't dealing with a Karen committee. I had contracts, lawyers, and the deed. A week later, Karen came storming up my driveway, again. Her fancy shoes kicked up dust, her sunglasses flashing like she was walking into a courtroom. She didn't even knock. She just started yelling the moment she saw me on the porch. "You think you can just buy everyone's land out from under them? You think you can turn our homes into your little kingdom?" I didn't flinch. "Karen, I didn't turn anything into my kingdom. You did that yourself when you made everyone live by your rules. The only difference now," I smirked, "is that I own the rule book." Her face turned red, almost purple. "You can't do this. You can't just make yourself landlord of an entire valley." "Actually," I said, pulling the deed from my jacket pocket and unfolding it, "the county says otherwise. Every square inch, from the bridge to the gate, including your yard, is part of my property." She froze. I swear I could see her eyes scanning that paper like she was trying to read her own obituary.
This isn't over," she stammered. "You'll regret this. But her voice cracked. She didn't have anything left to fight with. Not money, not power, not even her committee. She was just another tenant now.
Later that evening, I sat by the fire pit behind my cabin, watching the sunset stretch over the valley. The bridge I'd rebuilt stood firm, a symbol of what happens when people try to burn down others for control. You build stronger, you rebuild smarter, and you let karma do the heavy lifting. A knock came on my porch. It was Henry again, and a few other residents. They brought food, drinks, and even a small carved sign that read, "Valley Ridge, managed by Walker Ranch Properties." We laughed for hours, telling stories about the old HOA meetings, how Karen used to fine people for having the wrong mailbox color, or how she once made a kid repaint his bike rack because it didn't fit the aesthetic. Now the place finally felt free. But there was one last twist. About a month later, I got a letter from the county. Apparently, Karen had tried to appeal the property sales, claiming emotional distress and coercion. I had to show up in court just to settle it once and for all. So there I was again, standing across from Karen, just like before. But this time, she wasn't wearing pearls in a suit. She was in plain clothes, tired, defeated. The judge flipped through the paperwork, looked at me, then looked at her. "Mrs. Benson," he said, "based on the documentation, the land and associated properties were legally purchased through county auction. You have no claim. Mr. Walker is the rightful owner." Karen's shoulders dropped. She didn't even look at me. She just whispered, "Your Honor, I just wanted to keep the community beautiful." And for the first time, I saw something real in her eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, just regret. The judge nodded slowly. "That's admirable, ma'am. But beauty built on control isn't community. It's tyranny." Case closed. When I walked out of that courtroom, I felt lighter, like the valley had been washed clean of all that fake perfection. And as I drove home, down that winding road, over that bridge that once divided us, I realized something. Karma doesn't always come with thunder or fire. Sometimes it comes with a deed and a pen. Sometimes it looks like peace. When I reached my cabin, I stepped onto the porch, looked over the valley, and smiled. The air was quiet again. No HOA meetings, no threats, just birds, trees, and the faint sound of the stream. I raised my mug toward the sunset and whispered to myself, "Here's to freedom and to being your own landlord." And that's how it all ended. The HOA tried to run me out, but instead they handed me their whole kingdom. Karen learned the hard way that when you try to control others, sometimes you end up answering to the one person you underestimated the most. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because I've got plenty more HOA revenge stories coming your way. Until next time, stay free, stay bold, and don't let any Karen tell you what color your mailbox should be.